Warning! Spoilers! Lots and lots of spoilers! If you would prefer not to know anything about spoilers, spoilers alert!
Yep. Still a ghost. I've even lost my color up here, and somehow this sweater turned even lighter. Didn't know that was a side effect. So it looks like I'm just gonna be cursed to do this shit for the rest of my goddamn life. Yeah, I'll figure something out. Hello there, folks, and welcome to another episode of Crazy Thoughts, the show where we would normally take a look at some thoughts on video games that were recently played by yours truly. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be discussing thoughts on all of the anime in 2022 that yours truly has watched. As regular viewers may know, I have many interests, and this particular medium is just another one of those many interests. Now, I did watch a good amount of anime in my youth, mainly Miyazaki films and stuff you'd see on Toonami, although this is mid-2000s Toonami, so your Narutos, your Bobobos, your 4Kids One Piece. One of the only non-Disney or Cartoon Network related anime series that I watched was Triple X Holic, or whatever the fuck you call it, when I got the DVD for the very first season, or first couple of volumes, I should say, at the library. But outside of that, not a whole lot of viewing up until college. And even then, I didn't watch a whole lot. Mainly Gunbuster, Kill la Kill, Gurren Lagann. Why is it all Gainax and Trigger related stuff? But once college was all done and I still had yet to start paying off that fucking debt, I had acquired some friends who were much more knowledgeable in that particular medium, and thus started watching the grand old quarterly seasonal anime. And I've been doing that ever since, watching more and more shows throughout the years, and this past year, I think I've watched more shows than I have in the first few years combined. Not specifically for this video, but because I wanted to expand my taste just a little bit, because I had normally just kind of watched one or two different kinds of things, and, well, that didn't exactly change or anything about this year, but it's got some pretty interesting stuff. So why not talk about it on here for fun? I know some of y'all like some anime, and anyone else, well, maybe I can convince you. Actually, probably not, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, fair warning, I didn't watch everything that came out in this past year, so there are going to be a couple of omissions, and my points of references are going to be a little strange, at least in my eyes, from someone who's only been doing this for half a decade. And the way that we're going to be doing this is we're going to be going through each season, starting with winter, and then spring, and then summer, and then fall, and going through each of the shows from those seasons that I watched in alphabetical order. I also did something I don't normally do with, well, really anything, except for as a stupid joke. I got a little tier list going so we can organize my general thoughts on these animes and summarize them all with a letter grade rather than a stupid number. But that's enough dilly-dallying for now. Let's get started on some crazy thoughts. And to start with, we're gonna check out, See, this is the problem with alphabetizing your choices. You never know what you're going to end up talking about first. One of the many studios whose work I've been following since starting the seasonal anime stuff has been Cloverworks, because I would describe them as one of the most volatile studios in the industry. Because when they make some good stuff, they make some good stuff, but when they whiff, oh boy. On the one hand, you have Bunny Girl Senpai. On the other hand, you have Darling in the Franxx, a show that I actually haven't seen, but doesn't have the best reputation. On the one hand, you have Promised Neverland Season 1. On the other hand, you have Promised Neverland Season 2. On the one hand, you got Wonder Egg Priority, and then on the other hand, you got Wonder Egg Priority. You get the gist of it, right? So I challenged myself to watch every single show that they did this year, and luckily it was relatively manageable. They only made 7 of them. And 3 of them were from this season. So the first one we're going to be talking about is just one of those shows. It's called Akebi's Sailor Uniform. It's a very simple slice of life series about a young girl living in the boonies who's entering the same private middle school that her mother did while wearing the same sailor uniform that her mother did when she went to that same middle school. And so we experience the wonders of private girls' middle school and all of the friends that she makes and all of the experiences that she has. Like, this is about as simple as any slice of life show can get. It's simple in its plotting, it's simple in its characters, it's simple in their arcs, and that's all fine and dandy. But Cloverworks seem to have wanted to just kind of imbue this with just a little bit of something to make it stand out. And they did that by making it one of the best looking shows of the entire year. Perhaps the best looking show that they have ever made. And I don't say this lightly, this show looks fucking incredible. It's down to those rural backdrops and those super expressive character animations. The designs themselves also look great. There's just not a single part of this production that they skimped out on. Every aspect of it looks fantastic. And there are so many parts that I can point out to. The swimming match, the fishing sequences, the performance at the very end, the entire goddamn second episode. Like, I could easily recommend this to anyone wanting a chill and simple series that is pleasant to the eyes. It is worth watching on those aesthetics alone. Emphasis on could, because there's a slight caveat to all this. Now, allow me to briefly speak on fan service for a moment. This is a commonly seen aspect for many in anime, and there are many different kinds of fan service, but of course we're talking about the more perverted side. It's something that turns a lot of people off from watching anime. Or on. I understand why. It's not to everyone's taste, but when you've watched enough anime, you realize this just kind of comes with the territory. And let me state for the record again, I'm not a prude. Like, if you want to get trashy with your show a little bit, then I don't really care, it's fine. With all that in mind, Akebi's Sailor Uniform has some fan service, and you remember how I said that they didn't skimp out on any aspect for this show's production? Yeah, that also applies to that. And partly due to the fact that these are supposed to be middle schoolers, and how this is very specific fan service as well. It was a little bit awkward to sit through. Then again, I didn't go to a all-girls private middle school myself, so who knows, maybe it's common for them to send leg pics between one another after they just met. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Thankfully, it's not very prevalent beyond the first third of the show, and one could make an argument that there's a general air of it being, well, kids are just fucking weird, man. What do you expect? Which, it's a little flimsy, but sure, let's just go with that. At the end of the day, this is a very decent slice of life series with some fantastic looking visuals, and so it will comfortably sit in the B tier. This doesn't sound like something that would appeal to you. Well, you could always trick people into watching the first episode like I did with my friends. Good times. And let's follow that up with one of the more disappointing shows that I watched last year, Love of Kill. It's a great title. So in the year before that, there was a show that I watched called Dr. Ramune, Mysterious Disease Specialist. It was kind of one of those supernatural mystery, problem of the week type shows that had a relatively interesting premise. Kind of reminded me of like Doc Martin, but if he was a witch doctor. Yeah, I didn't finish it. It wasn't a great looking show. The mysteries weren't really that interesting. And there was a two-parter featuring possible child murder that was a bit too much of a lurch in tone, so I just kind of stopped after that. Well, the same production company and most of the crew who had worked on that show worked on this one. It's a romantic crime thriller about an assassin who is chasing after some bounty hunter chick for some inexplicable reason. They might have some history together or something along those lines. I have no idea. It could be anything. Could be anything. Yeah, I didn't care for this one either. At the very least, I can say that I did finish this one, and it's a little bit better than Dr. Ramune. The action scenes were pretty good. Pretty brutal. Probably the best part of the entire show, honestly. And that's really the only positive I can think of. Everything else just kind of... All I'm gonna really say is that if the leads in your romantic crime thriller, the main leads, have no chemistry whatsoever, you have a bit of a problem. Because this is the kind of stuff that really, really requires that strong chemistry to work. Especially when you have that assassin dude just fucking creeping on the bounty hunter chick. That said, she's not a very particularly interesting character either. She just kind of reacts to the situation as is and just goes along with it. Doesn't really have a whole lot to do, frankly. And yeah, while the assassin dude is a total creep or whatever, at least he has a little bit more personality than that fucking blobfish. And even when it does delve into both of their pasts and the trauma that they experience, I just couldn't get on board with it. It's just so dull. In fact, that pretty much sums up the entire show. It's very, very dull. It's a Black Lagoon wannabe that cannot even bother to have a good cigarette kissing scene. D-Row, next! One thing that you are all going to undoubtedly notice is that I like me a good rom-com. And there were many rom-coms watched this year. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite genre in the medium, but they are the easiest to get into, and just by design, they tend to have just a very satisfying narrative. You have two characters or more, and you get to see the growth between them, and when done well, it's just nice and relaxing. I never get sick of them. And one of the prime examples of a rom-com done well, and probably the biggest hit from this season, and my personal favorite as well, was My Dress-Up Darling. And here you have the standard format, two characters who meet each other under crazy circumstances. You have Goto, who is the grandson of a Hina doll shop owner and has been surrounded by them all his life and is damn good at making clothes for them. And then you have Marin, who is a super popular chick that is secretly a big fat nerd who wants to cosplay as all of her favorite characters but kinda sucks at doing so. So naturally, the two of them join forces and start a wonderful adventure in cosplay creation, cosplay photography, interacting with other cosplayers, and cosplaying, cosplay blah blah blah. On the surface, if one were to remove the whole cosplay element, this show doesn't seem to have a whole lot of differences from other shows of this nature, but what it does have sets itself apart from those shows in quite a few ways. First off, it looks fucking great. It's got that cloverwork sheen on it once again. Not quite as good looking as Akebi because the backgrounds are a bit blander, but it's just as, if not even more expressive than that show was too, so looks great. Secondly, the chemistry. The chemistry between these two is so wonderful. I love the way that they just bounce off of each other and the way that they just are treated as equals. It's exactly how they should be treated. And thirdly, it's just one of the funniest shows I've seen all year. And it's a lot racier with its humor than a lot of other shows that I've seen as well. As one would expect, there's a decent amount of fan service. Okay, I'm not going to mince words, this show's horny as fuck. But it usually serves that humor, and probably is one of the funniest instances of fan service that I have really ever seen. Fan servicey type humor does not typically make me laugh. This shit did. Every fucking time. And it just manages to keep up that energy for the rest of the series, and has some nice little twists with how these stories tend to play out. And God, it's just so nice to watch one of these big blockbuster type shows that actually lives up to the hype. Even with all of the other shows that have come out in that past year, it's held up pretty damn well. So yeah, this gets an A. This gets a real high A. There's no doubts about it. Good shit. So this is an anime based off of the free-to-play online third-person shooter game for the Switch that's made by the Puzzle and Dragons company and looked like a Splatoon ripoff, even though it's apparently not a Splatoon ripoff. I wouldn't know, I haven't played it. It's also directed by the guy who directed the Promised Neverland adaptation and Elven Lied. So, yeah, I just kind of had to check this out to see what this particular director was going to bring to a kid-focused show. And the series was being uploaded weekly on the game's official YouTube channel, so why not? Why not give it a shot? It's okay. It's just a kind of standard weekly action comedy type thing that you tend to see in anime a lot and tends to get a lot of episodes and tends to drag. Like, I watched this with my buddies and we barely got 7 episodes in. One of the kids almost gets hit by a car. That was funny. I really don't have much else to say about it. And sadly, another show that I did not finish. Like, you think a procedural series revolving around 2 female police officers would be pretty interesting and worth all of the awards its manga has gotten, but I thought it was pretty boring. Sorry. So there's a slight problem that can occur when you're talking about anime from a particular year, especially during the winter series, because you could end up talking about the second half of a series that started in the fall of the previous year, such as the case with Ranking of Kings. What also doesn't help is that this is a fantasy series, which is just as, if not far more prevalent, than rom-coms are in this medium. Isekai are fucking everywhere. And even then, I'm just not a big fantasy buff in general. I like your Lord of the Rings and used to like your Harry Potters, and just your general RPG kind of stuff as well, but I find all the standard kings and queens and dragons and magic and sorcery stuff to be is not very interesting. Ranking of Kings is very, very much in that general vein, too. And yet, I liked it a lot. And what makes it stand out from those other shows is that this is about a little deaf prince named Bocchi and his journey to self-discovery after he gets snubbed the throne following his giant-ass king father's death. And he tags along with this little sludge blob named... forgot his name, goddamn it. Meets all sorts of wonderful characters and getting into all sorts of wonderfully animated fights. Should mention this comes from Wit Studio, who did the first couple seasons of Attack on Titan and the first season of Vinland Saga before Akiba took them over. So you bet their ass they're gonna have some good fights in this show. But the best aspect, in my opinion, is its pervading warmth. Do not let the designs fool you. These characters go through some bad shit. And it's just so nice to see them try to overcome them and all of the struggles that Bocchi goes through and all of the characters that support him in overcoming those struggles. And just how, even despite all of his hardships, that they're so accommodating with his disability too. Like, I can't remember a show that did this and had almost every character doing sign language of some sort. It was so nice. It was so refreshing. But if we're talking about this second half specifically, I really, really like how it digs deep into the personal baggage for all of these characters. Because, God, oh, some of that shit is fucked up. And it's really nice to just see how it's all interwoven into the main plot and the connections between other characters. Although I think it kind of resolves a little bit too cleanly, and there was 1 or 2 decisions at the end I wasn't a huge fan of. Also, it mostly takes place in one area too, but honestly, those are nitpicks. So if you're like me and not super big on fantasy shows and you're sick of all the fucking isekai that come out, I don't really have a whole lot against it, actually. It's just there's so much of it. Give this show a try. It's getting another A. Okay, another rom-com, except this one has a neat little twist to it. Instead of it being about a boy and a girl, it's about a boy and another boy. What a profound concept. Even better, it's about how they read manga that's about boys liking boys. God, this meta stuff just cannot handle. Next you're gonna tell me that there's an anime about people making anime. Anyway, this show is part of the subcategory of romantic adjacent series called Boys Love, or yaoi if you want to be blunt, and has a very 2000-esque visual style that kind of harkens back to the Fruits Baskets reboot, and even Horimiya from last year, or the previous year I should say. Once again, this is not usually the kind of show I'd go out of my way to watch, but diversifying my tastes, that's what all that last year was about. So just give it a shot, and it helped that it was being made by Studio Dean, who are veterans in this industry at this point. So how'd it turn out? Yeah, it was pretty good. It's relatively simple stuff, but it does lean a little bit harder on the romantic aspects, as it's about the two characters meeting and then bonding over BL manga, and then seeing them grow and grow and grow. And it's quite slow in that regard, but in a rather comforting way. Like, there's a clear incline to the episodes and the progression in their relationship, and they wring a whole lot out of it. And by the end, like, God, it had a really satisfying ending. Like, not to spoil anything, but the kind of satisfying ending you don't normally see in a lot of romantic comedies in this medium. Try interpreting that. And I do like the way it has a bit of commentary on the common BL tropes that one could see. I mean, again, I'm not super knowledgeable about this particular subgenre, but it has some of its hallmarks, but not quite to the point of subverting it, but it does make some relatively interesting points. And like, again, it's not going to be for everyone because, well, the obvious reason, and also it's just a very, very slow burn. But if you're up for it, if you're up for the kind of series, give it a shot. It's pretty good. About as good as any show featuring beautiful boys bonding over manga featuring beautiful boys could ever be. Oh. And let's make it 3 rom-coms this season, as we talk about season 3 of Teasing Master Takagi-san. This is another series that takes place in a small coastal town, and features the boy, Nishikata, who's always trying to get back at the girl who just cannot stop teasing him, Takagi, even though he 99% of the time Charlie Browns his way into the most situations. There are a couple other shows that are in this particular vein as well, but personally I think Takagi-san is the best out of them all, because the teasing here is relatively light by comparison, and I guess feels more appropriate because it's middle schoolers doing this. Like, whatever, they don't know anything. Also, it just may be that this series holds a little special place in my heart for being the very first series that I watched when I started doing seasonal stuff. And it was also where I experienced my very first disappointment in learning that it was not a complete story. Well, the 3rd season has now come, and we more or less have that very complete story. I should also mention it's now on its 3rd distribution platform. Why? Now, to prep for this, I rewatched that first season, and finally got around to watching the 2nd season. And, initially I wasn't a huge fan of this series, and I'm not a huge fan of the manga either, which I read after watching that first season. But with these rewatches, I've come to really, really like it. It's just a nice, simple, funny little series. And this 3rd season, I gotta say, easily the best out of the 3. See, with these kind of adaptations, they tend to stick with the more pertinent chapters in the manga, and then just kind of try to tie it together into something relatively cohesive. Here, though, it appears that they just didn't want to do that all the time, so they just started making shit up, and by God, it worked! It was so nice to just see it kind of get progressively further and further away from the standard format and just finally let these two be. And it all culminates in this wonderful, adorable little finale that the movie then actually finishes, and that was also pretty good too. True, it does still have some of the lulls that one could expect with a slice of life series of this sort, but God, I just had the biggest fucking smile on my face by the end. So yeah, put in B-row. It's a wonderful time. This is the last show that Cloverworks produced this season, and is easily the one with the least amount of buzz surrounding it. I would say that's a shame, but well, there's a good reason for that. This one at least had the most interesting premise out of the three that they had done. It was like something straight out of a visual novel. It takes place in a cordoned-off section of Tokyo, the 24th ward specifically, and it revolves around these three characters, three best friends who all come from different social classes, and are just kind of living their lives in this 24th world until they start getting these weird premonitions of incoming disasters that are happening within the 24th ward from one of the friend's dead sister, someone they had failed to save so long ago. So obviously, these are opportunities for them to redeem themselves and such. Like, if you've ever heard of the trolley problem, that's essentially what these scenarios amount to. They do one thing or do the other thing, and both probably aren't as ideal as saving everyone. Again, some pretty interesting ideas going on here, and I can say it sounds like something out of a visual novel because it's written by one of the original writers of Steins Gate. And like the original Steins Gate visual novel, not the anime adaptation. Also, there are 4 writers on that visual novel, so you would think with my love for weird, stupid sci-fi visual novel stuff like Zero Escape and Danganronpa, I would be head over heels with this stuff, but yeah, no, it wasn't very good. Initially, it seemed like that was going to be the production's fault, because there was a rather infamous Twitter post from the animation director of the very first episode, where he's featured sleeping next to his office chair and lamenting about how much of a disaster this show is going to be. Again, this is Cloverworks we're talking about here, so it could have been very possible. But besides a couple of weird mixing issues with the audio and, well, the production not looking great, it did manage to hold up throughout the whole series. What really let it down was the writing. This shit is a total fucking mess. It's about as convoluted as any visual novel can possibly be, and even tries to add a lot of commentary on societal aspects like wealth, poverty, free will of the people, putting your dead daughter's brain in a tube that will power this crime prevention system straight out of Psycho-Pass. Spoilers. And it was kind of fun at first, but the more it builds onto it, the more it shows it really doesn't have a whole lot to say about this stuff. Like, all I really got out of this show was that, man, poor people sure do get a bad rep. And also, you probably shouldn't put your dead daughter's brain in a tube that will power a crime prevention system. Yeah, maybe that shit worked out pretty well for the Psycho-Pass folks, but not so much here. Like, at least when Kotaro Ujikoski was pulling this kind of shit, he wasn't trying to make some grand statement about how you should stop giving those poor people those goddamn drugs. I don't know. It's not a terrible show, but it's easily the worst thing that Cloverworks did all season, so putting it in D. Speaking of visual novels, the last winter offering that I went through comes from Mr. Danganronpa himself. It's an adaptation of a game that he and his buddies over at Tokyo are working on still, I think it's still not out yet after, like, what, 2-3 years now? Maybe even longer than that. It's called Tribe 9. And the premise here is, well, just imagine any typical 70s or 80s dystopian nightmare sports film, and, well, this one's centered around baseball. And this sounds like the perfect direction for Mr. Danganronpa to go. I really like his work and his batshit stories, and really want to see how he would be following his other forays into anime, specifically the Danganronpa adaptation, Danganronpa 3, and Akudama Drive, all of which I have seen, and now watching this one, I can definitely say it's a bit of a mixed bag. I haven't seen or played everything that Mr. Danganronpa has had his hands on, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this is the stupidest thing that he's ever made. But that is not a mark against it, because, as I thought was going to happen, this kind of scenario allows him to create the dumbest characters possible, putting them in the stupidest situations possible that revolve around this murder baseball thing, and mashing them together creates the funniest story possible. A lot of it intentional, some of it not being, and that's kind of the problem as well. This kind of show, there's a little bit of a balancing act with how serious you want it to be compared with all of the insanity going on around it. You know, for as fun as it is, whenever things do get serious in Tribe 9, it's just like, I don't know, I don't really feel anything. It does feel like it's trying to serve that almost parodic nature that the show was built off of, but it doesn't really work that well for me. Like, I love all the baseball shenanigans going on and the several ass pulls that happens during each match. I don't like the character beats that much, especially when they're this goddamn simple. And the production doesn't really help much. This is one by Leiden Films, who is a company who have the potential to make some really good-looking shows. And I've seen them make some really good-looking shows. But as of late, I don't know, man. They seem like they're kind of turning into a bit of a JC Staff kind of studio. Like, it hasn't gotten that bad, as we're going to see later, but I do worry. There's a lot of shows I watched in 2021 that they had made that were just not very good. I think I did make a big mistake going into this show by watching Akudama Drive right before it. And, well, that show is just as stupid and dumb and fucking inane as that series is, but, the difference is, it whips ass. Like, that is just a fucking high-octane action thriller throughout. That is just the most condensed and concentrated action series that I have seen in quite some time. So yeah, Tribe 9 does have a lot of flaws, but it's still a pretty fun show. I may give it a rewatch at some point. But I really am not, at this point, feeling much more than a C. I can't wait for the Massive Detective Raincode Chronicles game, though. It's coming on my birthday. I'm hyped. Gotta get through that second AI The Summoning Files game first. So now we are moving into the spring season, where I watched even more shows and have an even larger variety of them to talk about. Yep, a whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rom-coms. And some other stuff, I guess. And the first one up to bat is another one of those shows that's named after its main character, which I'm noticing is becoming quite common with these kinds of shows and series as of late. And this one is called Aharen is Indecipherable, and it's about a real tall, quiet boy who meets a real small, quiet girl, and all sorts of things happen. But that is not to dismiss it entirely. It does have some rather unique elements to it. If I had to describe this show in a nutshell, it very much puts a higher emphasis on the comedic aspects, and it almost feels like we're watching a neurodivergent take on the formula. Yeah, that sounds a little bit weird, but the series is mostly spent in like the imaginary scenarios that our real tall boy just kind of thinks up, almost like he's a fucking long, lanky-ass Doug. And yeah, it does have a lot of the standard scenarios that any other rom-com show would feature, but at random points it just goes in some very weird, bizarre direction, or has a weird cutaway gag that, without fail, always catches me off guard, and Man, I've laughed at this show quite a bit. Also true, there are some other shows that kind of do this as well. In fact, it kind of reminds me of a Tanaka-kun is Always Listless, if anyone remembers that series. Except this is less dreamlike than that was, and more absurd. And fun fact, when you're watching like 12 fucking shows at once or whatever, it can be a little difficult to keep up with them on a weekly basis. But this was one of the shows that I always did manage to do that with, because it was always just such a nice and relaxing change of pace from all of the other goddamn ridiculous shows that were happening too. Like, I was checking out some random screenshots from the show while writing the script, and got every single one of them, like, I could use as just the perfect way to get someone to watch the series. It really is that good. And surprisingly, it actually doesn't skimp out on the romantic elements too. It even has one of those endings I talked about a few moments ago. So yeah, this is a pretty good series. It's not super memorable, but it's a pretty fun time while watching it. I'd give it a B. Pretty high B. Good stuff. And speaking of bizarre, okay, so golf isn't one of my favorite sports, but I do have a fondness for it. So learning that there were going to be 2 golf shows this year was pretty exciting, especially that they were original golf shows, not based off of any other existing material. And of those 2, the one I was more interested in was Soraro Utility, mainly because the production team had a lot of folks who had worked on various Trigger projects in the past. The director was an animation director for Dynazamon as well, which is one of my favorite shows, probably my favorite Trigger show of the ones I've seen. So it was really exciting until I learned it was a 15-minute short. It's okay. But it did not satisfy my golfing needs, so it was up to the other show, Birdie Wing Girls Golf Story, to do that. This one from Bandai Namco. Yeah, they have their own production company, if you weren't aware. And to be frank, I really wasn't expecting a whole lot. Maybe a decent golf show with some decent golf show things. But instead, we got one of the craziest fucking things I've seen all year. It's like they took one of those super melodramatic sports shows of the yesteryears during like the 70s and 80s and just injected fucking mafia tropes into it. And even more Yuri. What we have here is the story of a young golfer named Eve who is living in poverty but taking on as many golfing kind of related jobs as she can to make enough money to support her adopted family and just get them the hell out of not France. And while she's doing all that, she meets an actual professional golfer, another young girl named Aoi, and together they form this wonderful rivalry and friendship and kind of, sort of, maybe romance of some sort. But that's just kind of the bonus to all of the fucking weird-ass and crazy golfing shenanigans that Eve finds herself in, and oh my god, it's so fucking awesome. Like, suffice to say, if you're expecting a super realistic golf show that actually adheres to the rules of golf, the strict nature of the sport, then you're a fucking idiot, and Birdie Wing doesn't give a single shit about your expectations, because it's just gonna go wherever the fuck it wants to. Like, oh, there's a whole bunch of trees in the way of me making a straight shot to the hole. Well, fuck it, I'm just gonna smack the ball as hard as I can and just make a beeline for it anyway. And oh no, I won the underground mafia golfing match, and now the mafia goons are coming after me with their rocket launchers in a car chase. I'm serious, that does happen. It's really fucking hard to articulate just how insane this show is without going through every single scenario that happens into it, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Trust me on this, though, it is that good. Like, so good, I am putting it as high an A as possible. It is almost in that S rank. Almost in that S rank, if only it just looked a little bit better than it would have gotten there. And there's going to be a second half. There's a second half this year that I'm really excited about. Hopefully it doesn't get delayed like every single fucking show has been this season. And now we go straight back to the rom-coms, and one of the harem variety, as a matter of fact. And I'm not super keen on these kinds of shows because they tend to get very trashy very quickly, and a lot of the time it's not very fun for me. Like the quintessential quintuplets was good. Rent a Girlfriend was not. I actually liked what I watched of Date Alive, and We Never Learn was a disappointing failure. So the singular harem show that I watched from this year was A Couple of Cuckoos, and right from the outset I was very intrigued by it. You have your standard male lead, Umino, who lives with his family above the restaurant that they can just barely make ends meet with, and the initial female lead, Amino, who is a rich, spoiled brat trying to get away from her family and the arranged marriage that they had tried to get her into. Again, sounds pretty standard at first, but here's the twist. Turns out, these two were swapped at birth, and they're actually the ones who are part of that forced arranged marriage, and now they have to live together. So of course, they're kind of polar opposites of each other, and just now have to put up with each other's bullshit, and just to kind of get the negatives out of the way, this is definitely not like raising the bar for these kinds of shows. It has a lot of the same tropes and contrived scenarios that one could expect out of it, and the humor is very hit and miss. Also, with this being a 24-episode adaptation of an ongoing manga, it can definitely feel like it's dragging its feet at points. All that said, it doesn't do anything bad with its ideas and themes, and the show really carries itself on those two leads, who I think are very likable. Like, for example, Umino, he kind of reminds me a lot of Futaro from Quintuplets. He's this no-nonsense dude who really puts everything that he says, like, in front of him. He actually has some fucking teeth, and he can beat the shit out of people as well, and knock those teeth out. Of course, except for the girl he is actually crushing on, who eventually does join in on the harem fun times. Honestly, she's probably my favorite character out of everyone, and Amino and Umino have some really good chemistry too, so it evens out. But the final person who joins in on all of that good stuff is Umino's sister, who, as a result of the whole switched at birth revelation, is now his stepsister. So, of course she's going to join in. Why wouldn't she? Now it's okay, because now they're not related. I mean, yeah, beyond the iffiness of that, I just don't think she's that interesting of a character, and I think she gets a little too much time spent on her very, very slow development. She's also just kind of annoying in general, but she's not completely intolerable, so once again, nothing terrible. And I don't want to make that sound like a backhanded compliment as a whole, because while Cuckoos really doesn't have a whole lot of major strengths, what strengths it does have, it plays into them very well. So, give it a very high C. Nice little show to watch. I'm probably not going to give it another run anytime soon, unless it has another season, which of course I'm definitely going to watch. I like the direction it's going. I didn't care for how it just ended, like if it was any other episode of the series, but you take what you can get. Mappa. Another studio that I have been paying very, very close attention to since I started doing this seasonal stuff, and have made a lot of great shows. And even the worst stuff that they have made that I have seen still look really, really good and have some kick-ass action. In fact, they are looking to be the go-to studio for shonen action stuff now, which would be great if they weren't such a shitty production company to work for. But now that we have that mention out of the way, let's get to the show that they worked on this year that wasn't the giant blockbuster one that everyone fucking loved. Danseur. This one's another adaptation, but comes from the director of Zombieland Saga, and is another music-adjacent series. A lot like the first ever show that they worked on, Kids on the Slopes, except this one is focused more on ballet and modern teenage angst instead of the jazz and 60s teenage angst that show focused on. And this show also has some of the most striking character designs that anyone was ever going to see all year. Like, oh boy, look at them eyes. And that's going to be one of the many turn-offs for anyone who had wanted to watch this show, and not the other one that would come out later in the year. Like, Who the fuck wants to watch this wizardry studio do fucking ballet and shit? That's fucking gay. This is one of my favorite shows of the year and is probably my favorite Mappa show. It gets an S rank, no questions asked. I'm done. See, the thing with this mic is that even if I'm a ghost, I will still hit into it. So I didn't want to do that. Yes, I fucking love this show. This is just another visual showcase from Mappa, and God, the level of detail in every single one of the dancing sequences, and just the general character animation, it all looks spectacular. This show could carry itself on that production alone, but what puts it over the top for me is that it has my favorite protagonist of any series that I have watched this year, Mr. Junpei Muro. God fucking damn. See, he had fostered a love for ballet growing up, but once he hit adolescence, that shit was out the window, and his stunt performer dad dying didn't really help matters. Because of course his dad died. The series is more or less him coming to terms with the fact that he still really loves ballet, in spite of his influences, in spite of his peers, in spite of the girl he's really crushing on, and in spite of himself. And I can see a whole lot of people just not getting on board with this dude. He is the picture-perfect teenage asshole character, sculpted to perfection, but he has so much moxie and bravado. He's just such a compelling character to watch. And yeah, the other characters are pretty cool too, especially the reclusive, gray-haired kid who gets bullied by everyone, including Junpei, well, he just fucking shows everyone up by doing ballet in retaliation to that. And that whole sequence of them doing this improvised version of Swan Lake and them trying to one-up each other throughout is just one of the best fucking things I've seen all year. It is so good. And there are definitely a lot of similarities between this and Kids on the Slopes, and not just because the same performer does both opening themes. However, this show also gave me a couple whiffs of Your Lie, April, especially with the more dramatic moments. Although this one's definitely a lot more tonally consistent than that show was. So while I do like that one, let me just say again, I love this show. And I am never, ever again going to hear that final theme from Swan Lake without thinking of this. Fucking masterful shit, man. S rank all the way to the top. Well, mostly to the top. And another one that I imagine most folks didn't check out, or cared about, or even knew of, Fanfare of Adolescence. What could a show with a title like that have, I bet you're wondering? Could it be like the most generic kind of show that there ever could be with a title of that sort? Oh, yes, actually. So this is another sports show revolving around a bunch of kids in their adolescence going to equestrian school to learn how to become jockeys. And it takes place over several years of their lives, and we get to see their experiences and struggles intertwine and learn how they become the best kinds of jockeys that they could possibly be. Okay, different. I like that. Unfortunately, it does not live up to that potential in a lot of ways. And I can point out to the main reason as to why. It looks bad. Of course, I'm referring mostly to the CG horses, but these are the main components of your sports show. If these do not look good, then you have a problem. And the rest of the show itself just looks really bland and just, pedestrian, very uninteresting. But if you can get past that, there are some decent narrative things going on here. Like, the main jockey boy that we follow is a former idol who is just being constantly hounded by his former production team to just stop fucking around with those horses, man, and get back on stage, bitch. And the other characters have all their things going on too, and have some decent arcs that they go through. I particularly like the one who was growing up way too fast and would be weighing down the horses and thus couldn't compete anymore, so he just tries to fucking starve himself. Sheesh. There's also a whole lot of random-ass English thrown in throughout, and all because of just one of the kids being from England, and that never ceases to be funny. Like, every single of one of these shows that just has this imperfect English, man, it just makes me wonder how they potentially view shows that are in English that they watch over there and just occasionally have some random Japanese person. There's also some homoerotic subtext that was relatively interesting throughout the series, so this stuff was enough to get me to watch the entire thing. But yeah, it's still a bit, but yeah, there's still just a lot of wasted potential here. It's not a bad show, but I'm definitely not gonna be watching it anytime soon, if ever. So put it in a C, like a very low C. Should have had more gay jockey moments. So I didn't mention this when talking about Takagi-san a couple moments ago, but the creator of that series has 2 other works that were being adapted into anime this year, and this is the one that I know the least about, In the Heart of Kunoichi Tsubasi. Kunoichi Tsubasi. Kunoichi Subi. I did get the impression that it was mainly about cute ninja girls doing cute ninja girl things, and something about them not being allowed to interact with men, which is a wonderfully original premise. And after watching it, I can definitely say that it was a show about cute ninja girls doing cute ninja girl things. Who would have thought? Primarily, this is a gag show. It is a comedy gag show. It features all sorts of these cute ninja girls who have their one comedic trait, and all sorts of comedic shenanigans happen when they clash together, especially when they fight. But the main plot of the series is about the main girl, Tsubasi, and her quest to find out what men really look like. Now, if one were to analyze this beyond the surface, you could argue that it's about a quirky examination of the burgeoning adolescence of a young female teenager person, girl, and their interest in boys, or disgust with them. But when you find out the real reason that they're not actually allowed to see men, it's about as stupid as it sounds. Obviously, story is not a very big concern when it comes to a show about cute ninja girls doing cute ninja girl things. It is a very good-looking show about cute ninja girls doing cute ninja girl things, because it's from Cloverworks once again, although it's not quite on the level of their best work that I had talked about previously. So your enjoyment for this series is going to depend on how much you like how it looks, and how funny you think that these weird ninja girl shenanigans are. For me, it was not very much. I found it more tedious than humorous, and there were a number of times I was nodding off while watching. It was just that boring. But hey, the Peggies do the main opener. It's a pretty good opener. I liked the Peggies quite a bit. Shame that they are now disbanded or just on hiatus or whatever. I'm pretty sure they're just done for, unfortunately. They had some of the best openers or songs of the 2010s in this anime world, so this is another they go out on. It's not better than Kimi no Se, but again, it's alright. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, this one. C. C rank. Cute ninja girls doing cute ninja girl things can only get you so far in life. Alright, we've got 5 rom-coms in a row we're going to be going through now, so prepare yourselves for all the cringe. First one up is the 3rd season of the ongoing Kaguya-sama Love is War series, about 2 fucking idiot high schoolers who are madly in love with each other and trying to get the other to confess to it through a bunch of 4D chess-like scenarios and similar situations. Although the series has evolved far and away from that gimmicky-sounding scenario to become one of my personal favorites in this particular genre, and many others' favorites as well. This was the first series after My Hero Academia that I had gone out of my way to by the original source material as it was airing, just so I can see what insane directions it was going to be going into after that season had finished, and we'd have to wait who knows how long for another one. It just wields its humor and drama in such an effortless way that even during some of the shakier elements later on, and it's a long-running series, it still fucking slaps, man. It's so good. Like with Takagi-san, I prepped myself for this third season by rewatching the first two, and this time with the dub, and it's probably the best Funimation, Crunchyroll produced, whoever the fuck these guys are now, dub that I have seen from them in quite some time. It is that good. And yeah, this series still absolutely fucking slaps, especially this third one. Like I said, at this point, the central conceit of the series has been whittled down as it has grown with its cast and has decided to develop those characters in deeper ways, and it's still firing on all goddamn cylinders. The production, narrative, everything about it is just so goddamn great. And the best thing about this particular season, that it is finally built up to what the series has been building up to for these past 3 seasons by the very end. And it is so glorious. I kind of wish I hadn't read the source material first, so this could have been a bit more impactful, but it's still getting a very, very solid A from me. It is that good. It is so great. Now, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but I have been placing these shows and ranking them within the tiers that they go, based on how I would probably organize them in just a general list. And, Love is War 3 is not in the top 10, but I still fucking love it, so that just goes to show how great this past year had been. Ah, yes, Komi-san, the beloved poster girl for how to be beautiful and still be a complete nervous wreck. Anyway, Komi Can't Communicate is a series that I have been reading for quite a long time and was wanting a mid-sized screen treatment adaptation of some sort for a very long time as well, as many other people have been clamoring for too, and then it finally did, and yeah, it's pretty good. Like, that very first episode is a perfect display of what this show can offer, and what it does offer is sweetness and crazy people. And it's interesting to see just how people reacted to some of those particularly crazy people, having not read up on the manga first, obviously. And, yeah, you know, I can understand why they wouldn't be taken by some of those characters, but the humor's pretty much always exaggerated with this show, and when it does get sincere, it works. It works very well. And for once, Netflix actually gave this anime and a couple others during that time a proper weekly structure to pace itself out instead of just dumping it all in one. It's a shame then that it appears that they have since abandoned that very, very novel practice, but now we're talking about the second half, and it's pretty much more the same, although unfortunately the production, it looks like, has taken a bit of a hit during this time, but overall it's still pretty good. Thankfully, the most important parts for this half that they were adapting are very, very nice looking, especially the field trip sequence. And it ends off on a pretty decent note, although it teases my 2 favorite characters in the manga right at the end, and I have no goddamn clue if this is going to get any more seasons, so we can only hope. We can only hope. Overall, this show fits very comfortably with all the other pretty good rom-coms in the B tier. It's just a fun little show for all the anxious folk in the world. So, Power Rangers. Like with a lot of other 90s stuff, they just kinda went over my head. It's mostly a generational thing. Like, I grew up in the 2000s on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon stuff. I didn't really watch a whole lot of Jetix or ABC Kids or wherever the hell the series was airing. And since then, I'm still not very interested in it, but I'm at least knowledgeable enough to know some stuff about the Super Sentai series that show is based on. And sure enough, we've got another rom-com this season that has a neat little tokusatsu flavored twist, and it's about the forbidden love between the Red Ranger and Rita Repulsa. Suffice to say, this sounded like a pretty intriguing concept. And fuck me if they did not wring out every single angle of this concept that they could and made it excellent. Like, this is another one of the rom-coms that leans harder on the comedic aspects and just goes in so many absurd directions that I was never expecting, especially just the world that this insanity takes place in. It just doesn't give a fuck, and it's great. Having seen some episodes of some tokusatsu series and a little bit of Super Sentai, it kind of seems like this is the general vibe for those kinds of shows, but in a much goofier and more exaggerated way. Part of me wants to do an extensive breakdown on this world just so I can point out every single ridiculous aspect for it, but I'll just say for now that this is the perfect kind of world for our main couple to exist in, because they are complete fucking idiots. Now, normally I'm not so big on shows that start out with the couple in question having become an actual couple, because the build-up to that is just more inherently satisfying. Like, if you want to do that build-up and then show off that couple being a couple, then that's totally fine. But from the start, that can be a little risky. However, this show easily surpasses any complaints I could have with a structure like that, because, as I said, the main pair here are complete fucking idiots. And I mean that in the best way possible. Just watching these two just bumble around and get into these completely stupid shenanigans and just act in so many dumb ways is so fucking funny, and every single side character is just as, if not more, dumb than they are, and it's also really funny. And it does not skimp out on that romantic angle as well. There's a lot of sweetness that comes with it, as well as a healthy dose of Cheesecake Factory, but it works for what it is. The only other concern I had going into this, besides my disinterest with this particular format, is that it was being produced by Project Number 9, and this kind of seemed like something that was outside of their wheelhouse, because they're more well known for very static and straightforward adaptations of light novels. But once again, the show just proves me wholeheartedly wrong about that. It looks pretty great, especially those action scenes. And if you're doing a Super Sentai spoof of any sort, you better have really good action to go along with it. Like, I genuinely hope we get to see more of this show. It was just such a fun time. But for now, I will just stick it healthily in the B tier. All right, we are on a roll here. We are doing super well. What's the next show? Oh. Yeah, this is gonna come up eventually, but Science Fell in Love, So I Tried to Prove It is another rom-com, although this time features college-age students in their 20s, and so that's another nice change of pace, although most of them still have the emotional experience of high schoolers, so nothing has really changed here, especially considering the central premise here is how the main pair have fallen in love with each other, but are scientifically trying to prove that love, whether or not it is possible, according to their dumb, stupid brains. Now, the first season aired quite a while before that, right before quarantine started, as a matter of fact, and it was a fun little show. Leaned a little too hard on the science aspect, which kind of detracted from it, but still a pretty fun little show. Not bad at all. And with this second season, it started out on a not bad note, too. I was enjoying it about as much as the first, and didn't really have a whole lot to complain. Because yeah, at this point they are now a couple, but they are still doing a whole shit ton of testing in order to keep proving that love and making sure their hypothesis stays valid for as long as possible. So, again, business as usual. Now, this is the case for the first half of this season, and I thought they were then going to spend the second half on the other couple, or just maybe still on the main couple, but just have the same shenanigans as usual. And from the previews, there seem to be some slightly dark implications with some of those characters, and that did come across in those first few episodes as well. So I thought that'd be an interesting angle that they were going to take. Maybe, again, just have a little bit of drama like they did last time, just to kind of end it off, and finish with a pretty sweet result. Except that's not quite where they went. Instead, they decided to have a little bit of an arc surrounding their straight man character. You know, the designated person who is just there to kind of react to all the craziness just going on around them, and just go like, oh man, this stuff, you guys are absolutely nuts, which is totally fair. Like, these people are fucking insane. And, and that's not inherently a bad thing at all. They can certainly give them any kind of development that they want. And what it seemed like they were doing was pretty interesting, because they were, in fact, kind of tackling that trope in so far as this straight man character just wanted to just continue being a straight man character and not become another one of these crazy postgraduate scientific horn dogs. So they develop a little bit of a complex regarding that, and that could be some pretty funny stuff, make for some relatively dramatic instances too. I, again, would not be opposed to it. Except, once again, that's not quite what they're doing. See, the complex isn't just for the sake of not wanting to go fucking insane and indulge in all of this stupid shit. It's from the fact that, well, they grew up in a judo family and know judo pretty well, and judo too hard on someone in their past, so ever since then, they've just had a little bit of a complex about that and just want to just keep being normal, keep having just a normal life, and maybe getting in a normal relationship of some sort. Now, ignoring the fact that the person she judoed too hard was her fucking teacher, who is like twice her age, okay, that's fine. Where is this going? Well, she tries going out with a dude who had seen her speech that happened at the end of the first season and was now just completely enamored with her and seemed like a completely normal dude, but her insecurities just kind of start flaring up, and that creates a bit of a conflict between this potential relationship, while also having another conflict with the male protagonist over how she really does not want to be viewed as not normal, because he's not normal and the female protagonist is not normal. Everyone else besides her is not normal. Okay, I guess. Alright. So by the end of the series, she has gone on enough dates with this dude to conclude that this could very well be just the normal relationship that she's looking for. And for some reason, once he decides to muster up the courage to ask her out, and she seems so ready to just say yes and accept her new life, reflexively, she says no. Okay, you know what? No. Again, that's not an inherently bad thing, because what could happen from here is that the show could examine some potentially interesting psychology into the reason as to why she just made that reflexive decision, something in the vein that the show would normally do, a very scientific explanation for this particular phenomenon. That could be very interesting, but once again, they didn't do that. As it turns out, the seemingly normal dude whose ass just got completely rejected turns out to be a complete fucking psychopath who then tases her, kidnaps her, gets his buddies to bring her to some abandoned warehouse, and then threatens to rape her if she doesn't go out with him. Luckily, the scientist man is there to save her by distracting the perpetrators with a well-researched essay on why she is, in fact, a very normal person despite her insecurities, and then the cops come, and then those sex offenders get arrested, and there's a rainbow. What the fuck happened? This is one of the most jarring shifts I have seen in any show since I started watching this seasonal stuff. This is a goofy, science-laden romantic comedy with maybe some little dramatic moments here and there, which are totally fine, but why are you now suddenly introducing kidnapping and attempted rape into the situation? And in the very end, all that really happens is that she just ends up falling in love with the male protagonists, and now he has 2 people vying for his affection. Like, if that was all that this arc was going to lead up to, there's just a thousand different ways that these writers could have gone, or more accurately, the original light novel folks who had written this could have gone, assuming this is all based on that light novel shit and is not just original material, which would make it so much worse. But for whatever reason, they just went, oh yeah, attempted rape, let's just do that. Let's introduce some very contrived drama here that is definitely not gonna turn off everyone who was invested. Like, in terms of shows just completely shitting themselves by the end, well, One Direct Priority still is the king of that of the shows I've seen, but Science Fell Off, too, it's a pretty close second. The first half of the show being just generally fine on the same level of the first season keeps it from getting an F, but it's still ain't getting higher than a D. Sometimes you just gotta break the regular critical format and just go completely nutso with how stupid a show can be. And I'm not so much disappointed with how this turned out than I am just completely baffled. This is the kind of bad stuff I am completely fascinated by in one respect, but also just really pissed off with because it's so needless. And I'm honestly not really sure if I'm interested in a 3rd season, should there be one. But if there is, I'll probably watch it. Just don't have any stupid shit like this in here. Okay, let's lower the blood pressure here a little bit and talk about the last of the 5 rom-coms in a row for this particular season in alphabetical order. These things just happen. It's another series where it already has our main couple starting out as an actual couple. Shikimori's not just a cutie. She is a normal high schooler. However, I was interested in this adaptation because it had most of the same staff that did My Senpai is Annoying, which was a wonderfully sweet series from the end of the previous year. And, yeah, this is about as lightweight as that series was. Although, remember how I mentioned that there are a couple different ways shows with this particular format can go? Well, this is the one I'm not super fond of. The first half of this show just consists of our main couple just being a couple, and it's really sweet, but not a whole lot actually happens, which normally isn't that big a detraction for me, but I don't know, I was just kind of bored with it. I honestly thought about dropping it at the halfway point as well if something interesting didn't happen. Like, I've got a bunch of shows on my docket already. I can definitely afford just knocking one off and save myself the trouble. But I kept soldiering along anyway, because, again, it wasn't really offensive or anything. And, good thing I did, because that second half picks shit up immediately. I'm not going to go strictly in the details, and it's nothing super dramatic that goes on here. But, I mean, the pathos that they introduce is very nice. I really like the characters' dilemmas that they feature here and just how much it strengthens that core relationship as a result. It's pretty satisfying. So yeah, it's not the best one I have seen. It's still going to go in the C tier, but it is a nice and breezy little watch, and if you are looking for that kind of show and don't mind its first half being kind of dull, or at least in my opinion kind of dull, give it a shot. It's pretty decent. Pretty decent stuff. Technically, only the first half of this show aired during the spring, and its second half aired during the fall, but it all aired during this year, so I'm just gonna count it as a whole and talk about it as a whole. Anyway, this is one of the biggest heavy hitter series of the year, Spy X Family, featuring a lovely, timeless little tale about how a spy needs to create a fake family for a long-term mission, so naturally he finds himself a good assassin to marry and a neat little telepathic kid to adopt. And all sorts of fun, wacky shenanigans ensue, and Yeah, fun is really the best way I can describe most of this show's aspects. It's just a lot of fun, and consistently fun at that. This is another one of those shows I did not fall behind during its weekly release. It's just a safe bet for a fun, relaxing time. Not to say it's a predictable and undemanding series, but it's the kind that the whole family could watch, and I mean that sincerely. Like, I can see people who loved Miyazaki films just getting totally on board with this stuff and its universal themes. It's also really funny, really cute, and really heartwarming. You just can't go wrong with Spy X Family. Once again, it's just great to see this kind of blockbuster series actually live up to the hype, and we can thank the folks at Cloverworks and Wit Studio for that. The latter of whom is likely responsible for the action scenes, and like I said before, Wit knows their action, and this is no exception. Sure, the pacing is a little bit wonky here and there, and especially during the second half, but that's really the only issue I can think of. Like, this thing has the most nominations for Crunchyroll's stupid anime awards thing, you know, the one that they changed their rules for this year, so that their biggest show ever ended up not being eligible for nomination this year. The next one, though, oh boy. And I can definitely say it is wholeheartedly deserving of all of those nominations. It is just such a great show to watch. It's getting an easy place in the A tier. Good stuff. So Disney got in on the whole seasonal anime free-for-all this year. Woohoo. It's not entirely unexpected. I've been involved with the distribution side and localization side for quite a long time now, Miyazaki once again. And it's more exposed to the world than it has ever been before, and it's more lucrative than it has ever been before. So why not try to cash in on this potential gold mine too, and indulge on this stuff? But do they really have to go the Netflix route of staggering releases globally? Such is the case with another one of their acquisitions, and the only acquisition they had for this season, and the only acquisition of theirs that I have seen, Summertime Rendering. This is based off a well-regarded Jump Plus title that had some pretty big hype behind it. And what did Disney do? Put it in Southeast Asia, and then dump it to Hulu 9 months later in the States. Thanks. Folks had to wait quite a bit longer for that unless they went the har-har route, and not everyone goes the har-har route, so unless you put in a little bit of money into your marketing so that you can make this shit profitable, it's just another fucking case of, oh, we want this. This is ours now. Wait, what the fuck is this shit? What do we do with it? Just dump it on the Hulu. And if for some bizarre reason I sound ever so slightly peeved about that decision, it's for one very simple reason. This is my favorite show of the year, and it continues having the tradition of having all of my favorite shows of every single year get fucked over one way or another. Promise Neverland was pretty great, Blu-ray's expensive as hell, and the second season sucked ass. Keep Your Hands Off Ezekiel is fantastic, probably my favorite thing I've seen since I started watching this crap. Where the fuck is the Blu-ray release for that? And we can't forget Aquatope on White Sand, which didn't really get treated like shit, but is like, I think I'm the only person in my general circle who has seen that show. And, also, where's the Blu-ray release? So yeah, I got a pretty good feeling it's just gonna keep continuing, and God, I hope whatever my favorite show is this year has all of its negatives erased for some reason. Just fuck it. Anyway, yeah, Summertime Rendering is my jam, and I could spend so much time gushing about it instead of just bitching about Disney. But it's one of those shows that I think is best watched knowing as little as possible about it. In fact, while I will briefly talk about this series and my brief thoughts about it, anyone who doesn't want to hear them for fear of just that, here's the option to skip on to the next show. All you need to really know is that this is getting an easy S rank. Like, it's not even a contest. Like, come on. Okay, yeah, this is the most excitingly tense thriller I have seen in quite some time. Not just in this particular medium, in just anything. And I absolutely adore stories that are set in small communities like this, because you get a tight-knit cast of characters who interact with each other so well, which makes it all the more terrifying when they start getting picked off one by one, and in some shockingly brutal ways. The very first episode has the best possible start that any show like this could ever have, and it does not lose the pace at all from there. It just keeps going, adding more momentum as each episode passes. It just rocks so fucking hard. It also reminded me way too much of those adventure, mystery, thriller, visual novel games that I had mentioned just a few moments ago. So the announcement that this was getting its own visual novel adaptation from the folks who did those science adventure games was very unsurprising. It does have a couple of small issues. I do think the production takes a hit during the second half. I did get lost in some of the roles and just how these situations are supposed to work. And it does have some fan service that I didn't think was all that necessary here. But these are very, very small complaints, small nitpicks in what is, again, my favorite show from this year. It is just so goddamn good. If you have Hulu or Har access, everyone has Har access, please give it a watch. Like, if you've had a hankering for it at all, just give it a watch. You will not regret it. And hopefully the next one gets treated better. Okay, we kind of splooge all over my favorite show of the year. Now let's splooge all over my least favorite show of the year. This is getting a Blu-ray release before Aquatope. Because of course it is. Imagine a combination of Danganronpa and Kakurugi, where 5 high schoolers have been kidnapped and are forced to play this money-based game, but instead of their lives being tested, it's their friendships. Because they're all saddled with a huge-ass debt that they have to pay off or be crippled by for the rest of their lives. Again, it's a pretty interesting premise, and the show seems to think so too, because we're not even 5 minutes in before we get into the whole Tomodachi Game. 5 whole minutes are given for this show to establish these characters and their relationships and provide one solid reason for us to care about them as they try to get their stupid asses out of debt. And it fails to do that so hard. In fact, it just fails to show them as friends in general. Like, the amount of strife between these 5 idiots is fucking absurd. It's like we're watching the anime version of Unfriended. It's a bit of an issue when the central premise kind of falls apart almost immediately, and that's sort of the running theme with this series. It just cannot get out of its own fucking way. The pacing is a mess, the game rules make no goddamn sense whatsoever, the Monokuma knockoff is fucking annoying, and every single chance there's given for a little bit of intrigue, the show just blurts out whatever buildup it was trying to go for, and it just... Why do I keep watching? Why the fuck should I care? And it just seems so fucking pleased with itself, too. Like, at the end of one episode, the moderator that we also get to see, because, of course, this whole thing is just orchestrated by this big shadow corporation, whatever, spoilers, you probably knew that anyway. They just go, oh man, this, the main guy here, oh wow, he's cooking up something good, he's cooking up something real good, and if you guys at the audience there haven't figured out what the fuck he's cooking up by the start of the next episode, well, you're all just fucking idiots. What the fuck are you still doing here? Like, okay, bitch, I get it. You think you're clever, you think you're profound, but guess what? You're not. Like, even Babylon had more merit to its pretentious ideologies than this tripe ever could. And the worst thing is, this is based off of a manga that has been going on for almost 10 years. Like, I know these kind of series aren't guaranteed to have more than one season at a time, but you couldn't have just tried to pace yourself just a little bit better? Maybe just build the intrigue a little bit better, too? Just do things just a little bit better overall, and could have been much better than... Fuck it. Looking at this, I just had to see what other people who were watching this thought, and they were eating it up. They were fucking loving it, and I was actually kind of surprised at first, but then I thought for a second, and, you know, that makes a whole lot of sense. This feels like the kind of show that makes for your first big boy or girl anime. Big person anime. Big whoever anime. This is the kind of show you watch during that time that you think is the sickest fucking shit ever, and then 10 years on, you reflect upon your anime viewing experiences in your past, and when you get to this show, you go, wait, why the fuck did I watch this crap? And that is completely fine, because people come to those revelations naturally. But, yeah, I can't really imagine how long it's going to take with this show, especially since it's probably not going to get a second season. Fingers fucking crossed. And I don't want this segment to be just me completely shitting on this series. I think it's presented decently, and the second half was pretty funny because the worst character almost just starves himself. And it's just really nice to see him suffer, because I fucking hate that douche. Oh, and the intro, the OP, that's actual bop. Actual fucking bop. Really the best part of this show. Yeah, that's it. I did not like this show. In fact, I very much hated it. And only finished it out of spite. And of course, it ended on a fucking cliffhanger. Like, of course it ends on a fucking cliffhanger. Put an F. Luckily, this is the only show that's going in F this year. Okay, and let's balance that negativity out with another positive one, and finish the spring season off with another good show. Another little goofy show too, ya Boi Kongming. See, what would happen if an ancient Chinese general were isekai'd into modern-day Japan, suddenly learned how to speak Japanese, and then teamed up with a struggling singer-songwriter to act as her manager and make her the biggest fucking star in the world? A lot of rapping, surprisingly. But yeah, that is the central gag and core of ya Boi Kongming, and it gets quite a bit of mileage out of that, and you can thank the good folks at PA Works for it. Like, these guys have put out some of my favorite shows in the past few years. You got Opera Ranman, the aforementioned Aquatope on White Sand, and, you know, they're usually better at their original work than with adaptations, from at least what I have seen so far, but this is still a very solid show all around. I can't really say a whole lot besides that outside of its premise. It just hits all of the notes that a good musical comedy should. It's very funny, good production, good characters, good solid emotional core. It's just got everything. It's pretty fucking good. And of course, that intro, which thankfully actually did become a bit of a meme, which I'm very happy about. Ban ban na chiki chiki 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 chiki. Who knew a mid-2010s Hungarian EDM track could make for a good 80s high-energy throwback? Yep, can't really say much more other than they knocked it out of the park. Give it the 8. Okay, on to summer, where I checked out half as many shows as I had during the spring, and yet I still have plenty to talk about, especially with this first show, Call of the Night. I was aware of the manga and the author's previous work too, and I had some friends who were fans of it, and the premise was, again, pretty interesting. It's about a middle schooler named Ko, who does not like people and really does not like the day, so he skips schools to go out and explore the vast and voracious world that is the night. And he just so happens to meet a quirky little vampire girl named Naozuna during one of those excursions. And he becomes so enthralled with her and just all the potential one could have by becoming a vampire that he decides he wants to become one himself. Unfortunately, the only way that he can do that is by falling in love with a vampire and having them bite you. So this series just kind of chronicles his journeys into the night with Naozuna as he meets a whole bunch of people, some previous friends, some other vampires, some just complete strangers, and they all go towards him opening his heart up little by little by little. It's a very cool spin on the standard coming-of-age story, and when it comes to the romance, they just absolutely sell it, but not in like an erotic way, in a more intimate way. Let me just say there's a lot of blood-sucking, them being vampires and all, that should be obvious, but probably what should have made it more obvious was that this is from the director of the case study of Vanitas, which is another vampire-themed series from the year before that also had a lot of intimate blood-sucking scenes. Although, to my knowledge, I think those are even more intimate. But that's not all this guy did. In fact, he's the one responsible for those Monogatari adaptations, which, if you know anything about, is for how offbeat and fucking cracked they are, and Call of the Night is no exception. It just absolutely revels in that shit, and God, the direction here, fucking impeccable. The show is once again produced by Leiden Films, and while the actual animation is normally not anything to write home about, that direction carries this show all the way through. It really is that good. But what also helps is those goddamn nighttime backgrounds. Like, I watched every single episode of this show in the dead of night, and I would not have had it any other way. And now I'm not going to be able to watch it any other way. Like, I could just recommend this series based off that presentation alone. It really does look that great, and it just so happens to have a really engrossing story along with it. So, great stuff, wonderful series, S rank. It's the best thing that I watched this season. The rest was okay. Yeah, this one was definitely not going to fly by me, but I can't really talk about it without spoiling the premise. So if you know absolutely nothing about this show and want to be a little bit surprised by yourself, then give it a watch or just skip to the next segment. You producers and promotional people think you're so clever for teasing out these kinds of series and making us think that they're going to be one type of show, and then when the first episode starts, it ends up being a completely different kind of show. Well, I am here to judge whether or not that is effective in this case at all. It was. Lycoris Recoil was definitely one of the most unique series that this year had to offer. It's a slice-of-life series about these cute girls running this little cafe and going on a bunch of these little just common errands like stopping worldwide terrorism and preventing an illegal gun trade from going through, and, well, just having guns in general. But I mean, what Maid Cafe doesn't have guns? But yeah, a hybrid of a slice-of-life series and a gunslinger girls-esque espionage in action was definitely not what I was expecting going into this, and a lot of people really dug this. They loved the action and the production and just how the story came together. Those characters, too, completely undeniable. This show was insanely popular, and it's definitely not hard to see why. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. For one, I will definitely agree it is well presented. I love the vibrant look it has, even during the action scenes. But those action scenes, fucking great, and definitely not as violent as they could have been, and I'm a little bit thankful for that. And the cast is nice too. I really love the main pair, especially Chisato and Takina. I think they just bounce off of each other real well, and their individual arcs are very nicely developed, especially Chisato. With all that said, I do wish the overall plot did its hybrid nature the justice that it deserved. For as cool an idea as this premise sounds, in execution, well, I don't think it doesn't work. I think there is a lot of intrigue and mystery, but it just doesn't really mesh together that well with the slice-of-life shenanigans. Like, the plotting and pacing just feel real haphazard, and what I thought it was going to lead up to sounded really exciting, but it just chickens out of whatever interesting message it could have displayed here, and yeah, it was kind of a disappointment. One of those endings that the more I think about, the more I really don't care for it. And I mean, there's already going to be another series or maybe a film or whatever the hell they're going to be working on next with this franchise. So, I mean, I'm not going to be against it. I still think it's pretty good, but missed opportunity. Oh yeah, B tier. Okay, this is another rom-com, but one that's a bit more conflicted with itself than pretty much all of the other shows that we've seen. The maid I recently hired is mysterious. It's about a little rich boy whose parents died in a terrible accident. Now he's just left all by his lonesome in this huge-ass mansion until this wonderful little maid, well, not little, wonderful maid person lady comes along to lift up his spirits and take care of him, but he thinks that she is just way too suspicious. Like, what? Why is she here? What are her motivations? So naturally, shenanigans ensue. And it's cute. It's got its moments, and I'm not super bothered about the age gap thing, but well, this show really does seem like it wants to have its cake and eat it too. Not that kind of cake. When I say conflicted, I mean that this show can't seem to decide if it wants to focus on themes of family and trust, like they're pushing these two as a mother and son, or a sister or son, or some sort of familial relationship, or if they are trying to make this a believable romantic couple. And it just goes back and forth between these two, and doesn't really seem to have much of a flow, and by the end, kind of sort of pushes towards the latter, which personally I don't think was the right call, because what this kid really needs is a parental figure of some sort. There was another show that I actually did watch this year that came out in the previous year, Kokoro Lives Alone, that was a much better example of this kind of show and what it could have been. Although that show was a lot, and I'm not sure it would make for a great alternative, but I can definitely say it was a lot better than this ended up. It's not bad, but it just wasn't really that interesting. Give it a C. Just try not to blend your family and romance together, or else you're gonna end up with something like... Oh, well then. Perfect segue. So yeah, remember when I talked about Project 9 a little bit ago and mentioned that their bread and butter seem to be these pedestrian-looking light novel adaptations? Yeah, this is that. Now, I've only seen 2 of those kinds of shows that they've done. A bottom-tier character, Tomozaki-kun, and Higihiro. One is pretty good, the other not so much. And with the premise this show seems to be running with, well, my expectations weren't really that high, but wasn't a whole lot of interesting stuff out this season, and well, why not spice it up with this? See, this series has a boy and a girl who were once in a relationship, but that had broken apart, and yet fate has intertwined them yet again as their respective parents married each other, so now they're step-siblings. Let the hilarity and trashiness ensue. Now, this is not the first kind of step-sibling romance series out there, and again, it's not the kind of show I look for in this particular subgenre, but I do like the idea of a former couple just kind of being forced to live together, and the interactions and humor that could come out of it, so why not? And I gotta say, I was actually kind of surprised with this one. Now, it didn't win me over at first. It seemed like it was going to be about as trashy as its premise implied it was, and man, I'm really starting to get sick of this snafu-esque verbose dialogue style that a lot of these light novel adaptations have. But the series actually does delve into the former relationship between our 2 main characters and how it's changed them as people since, and how they're just trying to manage their feelings and impulses since. And as the show went on, I was actually getting really invested with these 2, and was really wanting to see just what exactly led to this middle school breakup in the first place, and my god, the show was smart enough to spend a whole ass episode dealing with that, and it's one of the best singular episodes I've seen in any show this year. And I'm being 100% serious here. It really is that good. It's just like watching an adolescent train wreck. You can't look away. Now, it doesn't make it a great series. Like I said, those first few episodes were a little tiring to get through. I didn't find them particularly likable at first, and I think all the side characters are just really tedious, but this is one of the shows you just kind of let sit with you. Let it simmer. And if you do get into it, you'll find it pretty rewarding. So, give it a B. Nice job. Shadow's House. Shadow's House. While it wasn't one of my favorites, this was another show from the previous year, from the current year that we're talking about, that I was absolutely enthralled with. It draws heavily upon the original fairy tales of ye olde times that were quite a bit more fucked up than the modernizations of them, and it takes place in this big old castle where the shadows live amongst their dolls, and it had this great mix of storytelling, mystery, fun characters, and visuals, and I was absolutely looking forward to see how they were going to do with this next season. But my god, I was not expecting them to completely knock me out of my socks. This is the best thing that Cloverworks have done right up to My Dress-Up Darling this year. Like, this is one of those cases where that first season was just a shitload of build-up to all the nutso crises that our characters would have to deal with, and it just goes in all sorts of weird and fucking awesome directions. I don't want to spend too much time with it because it would just take up even more time and involve even more setup, but every single element of the story gets expanded here. Every single major character gets expanded on here too, and it features some of the best fucking twists I have seen all year, and in quite a long time since starting all of this. This is some goddamn top-notch storytelling. It's funny because I was comparing this show to The Promised Neverland when it first originally came out, because it had also been done by Cloverworks and has a very similar kind of kids need to find a way to get the hell out of this house lest they succumb to a horrific death kind of premise. But with this second season, this show has now surpassed Promised Neverland in overall quality. I didn't expect us to come to this point, but here we are. If that kind of stuff intrigues you in any way, go back and watch that first season, and then enjoy the hell out of this second one, because I guarantee you, it's going to be a great time for you. A rank, no debate. Look, it was either going to be this or Rent a Girlfriend Season 2. And clearly, I made the right choice. Or maybe it was the wrong choice. I'm honestly not sure at this point. I don't know if you can tell, but there was obviously not as many interesting things out during this season than there had been in the previous season, and that's especially the case with the next season too, so slim pickings. Of course, the obvious solution would just be to not watch 8 goddamn shows at the same time, but like I said, this was a period of experimentation and expanding my tastes. So why not try a sexed up fantasy show featuring an idiot wizard boy who summons a super hot demon chick, and the bulk of the show is figuring out whether or not they fucked or just French kissed all night. What am I doing this? Oh, and be a badly produced sexed-up fantasy show at that, where the action sucks ass, the tone is all over the goddamn place, and yet every single one of its aspects is just generic as fuck. And this thing expects me to take its characters seriously by the end. Yeah, this is definitely not my kind of show, but it was pretty funny at points, so I'll spare it with a D. So this is the third adaptation of a series from the writer and artist of the Takagi-san manga, and one I was actually looking forward to because I actually read the manga for it ahead of time, and ever since it had started actually, and it's my favorite of the 2 that I've read. With a very nice title of When Will Ayumi Make His Move? With the very nice title of When Will Ayumi Make With the very nice title of When Will Ayumunga When the very nice title When the very with the very nice title of When Will Among Us Make His Move? It's another rom-com, but one that's centered around shogi, fuck it, whatever. And it features our main character Among Us's quest in beating his crush Urusei. The fuck is wrong with me today? Beating his crush in a shogi match so that he can confess to her. No handicaps, all meat. But of course the problem is she is very, very good at this game, so that's gonna take a while. Yeah, it's not really that different from other rom-coms out there, but it's cute, it's fluffy, it's fun, so I was expecting the show to be just as cute and fun and fluffy, and I mean, yeah, it kind of was, but couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. And it sucks because it starts and ends exactly where I thought it was going to, but the production here just cannot deliver. This was done by Silverlink, who I had forgotten to mention during the Mysterious Maid show, because they also did that one. And like with Project Number 9, they tend to stick with adaptations and aren't usually known for very good-looking shows, and unfortunately this is one of them. Everything just looks so flat and bland, and what was weirder is that there's some milky filter over everything that just made it just look so... ugh. Also, the pacing was a real big issue too, and I mean, I already knew where the story was going anyway, but still a problem. And, well, it was also a bit of a problem when I find myself more interested in the B couple than the main couple. And, well, that doesn't even get a proper conclusion. Again, it's fine while it's on, and I do like the original source material, but I ain't feeling more than a C on this. What a shame. And to finish off summer, the very, very underwhelming summer, we have the ultimate disappointment. And from a company that I thought wasn't capable of it. Yurei Deco comes from the wonderful folks at Science Saru, who have made a whole load of series and films that I am very fond of, especially Keep Your Hands Off of Ezukun. And when I saw those previews and witnessed this weird sci-fi utopian kind of world, and how this is going to be some strange reimagining of Huckleberry Finn, I was all in on it. And at first, I was enjoying myself. See, the show takes place on a lone island where its citizens use these devices called decos to augment their vision and view the world as a bright and bubbly place where nothing bad ever happens, and yet there's always something sinister happening behind the scenes, and when you take off the deco, you can truly see it. Such is the case with our main character, Barry. She is devoted to this clean and polished society until she meets a girl named Hack, who comes from the unpolished and unclean society, and the two team up together to uncover all the mysteries behind this island. Yeah, subtlety isn't really this show's specialty, but I was very much enjoying the bright and adventurous spirit it had to offer, and takes a lot of really neat twists and turns, and as it adds more characters, things get really, really interesting, and it all leads up to... Similar to Tokyo 24th Ward, this show has a lot of very interesting topics, and it has a lot of things to say about those very interesting topics, and tries to use those statements to form a cohesive story, but it just does not come together. What reveals there are behind the mysteries are pretty underwhelming, and the core message behind this show by the end felt like something along the lines of, if you find the big machine that controls how the world looks and shift it to your own means, then you can make the world a better place. Yeah, I'm just gonna blame the writer for how this ended up. Also, what the fuck does this have to do with Huckleberry Finn? Like, I see a few parallels here and there, but they're loose at best, and some of them are a little concerning. All that said, this isn't nearly as embarrassing as Tokyo 24th Ward's attempts at commentary, but suffice to say, I just left kind of unimpressed, and again, that sucks, because there are a lot of fun moments here, and it still looks great. If I were to ever watch this show again, it would probably be due to that. But as is, this is easily the worst thing that I've seen from Science Saru, and maybe the worst thing they've ever done, honestly, just looking at everything else they've had their hands on. I mean, yeah, Japan Sings that 2020 was a complete mess, but it was a fun mess. I'm giving it a stern C. Hopefully the next one turns out better. At last, we have arrived at the insanely packed fall season. And let me tell you, in my experience, in the 5 years that I have been watching these seasonal shows, I have not seen a season this packed. Or at least a season this packed that I went out of my way to watch more than one show during. 13 shows, in fact, although this was my breaking point. I'm definitely not going to do something like this ever again, and there are a couple shows I didn't end up finishing for one reason or another. The experiment failed. But at least I can take solace in the fact that this season easily had the best crop of shows out of all 4 of them, and I can say that with confidence because this was the season that us viewers were gifted with Akiba Maid War. I really do not like doing this, but once again, if you don't want to hear anything about this series and had a slight bit of interest in it, just skip this part entirely. You have to know nothing going into it in order to get the full impact. I'm serious. Okay, so previews for this show were a little bit vague as to what exactly it was about. It appeared to be some kind of period piece about the maid cafe phenomenon of the late 90s that apparently happened, and it was being produced by both Cyberpunk Games, who had worked on Zombieland Saga, and PA Works, as this was the other show that they had done this year. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when watching this, and neither did many other folk, and once I finished that first episode, oh my god. I had a nickel for every time a show had some weird, vague promo material and ended up being a girls with guns and slice of life hybrid. Well, I would have only 2 nickels, but it's weird that's happened twice, especially in 1 year. Kind of like how we had 2 golf-related things this year. It's a very, very strange year. The major difference between this show and Lycoris Recoil, though, is that instead of wishy-washy attempts at a Secret Service kind of plot, this one revolves around a parody of Yakuza tropes. You have this bright-eyed and wondrous and happy-go-lucky chick who has always looked up to those maid cafes and ends up joining one and expecting to bring all sorts of smiles to their customers' faces and having such a great time, and end up getting caught in the betrayals and violence and loss and bloodshed and all that other fun Yakuza stuff instead, and meeting a whole host of characters that all embody some kind of Yakuza trope or maid trope in one way or another. And all of this is happening when they're dressed in these ridiculous maid costumes, like some sort of cosplay event gone awry. And man, I did not know what to make of this at first. Like, I was not 100% sure if this mixture was a very good fit, and even if it wasn't taking itself super seriously, it's a very strange note. And I just felt like I wasn't really going to get on board with this. It felt like it was just too much. But once that initial shock wore off and I rewatched that first episode, everything clicked, and the rest of the series is just absolutely phenomenal. Every single fucking moment of this show gave me the biggest fucking grin on my face. It is so goddamn goofy, so ridiculous, and yet never, ever drops that very fucking stern look on its face when telling this Yakuza story, while every single one of these characters are dressed up in increasingly ridiculous outfits. Now, it does make some rather sly comments at itself, based on just how the world around this weird-ass Yakuza maid cult, or whatever the fuck this fucking society is, reacts to it, except it still manages to tell a legitimately compelling Yakuza story if you buy into that universe. There's some legitimately heartbreaking moments in this fucking show. And, like, one in particular that was built up to since the very beginning, just like PA Works did with Aquatope on White Sand last year. The only difference between that show's moment and this one is that the next episode of Akiba had me laughing my goddamn ass off. Now, I will say this show is definitely not going to be for everyone, and the production can look a little bit stiff at points, but the only thing keeping this show from being my favorite of the year is that the first episode was not as immediate. Even then, this gets an S rank, right behind Summertime Rendering, and right above all of the other shows that I put on there this year. I can't believe that this thing exists. I cannot believe that no one came up with this idea before, and I cannot wait to see whatever the fuck else Cyberpunk Games and PA Works are going to be putting their hands on over the next year. There's something coming out soon called The Marginal Service that Cyberpunk Games is doing next that I know absolutely nothing about except for the promotional material. What are they fucking cooking there? Oh wow, it's been a very long time in this video since we've talked about a sports show. Thanks, Blue Lock, you fucking psycho. So these shows' previews had me and a bunch of other people going, oh, soccer Danganronpa. And that's pretty much what that is in a nutshell. Like, you have a bunch of these super talented high school soccer players who are placed in this dome called Blue Lock and pitted against each other in order for only one of them to become the best striker that Japan has ever seen. And should any of them fail, they get shot on sight with a big soccer ball-shaped bullet. Like, Jesus Christ, the first time that happened, it was like fucking red light, green light from Squid Game, but the bullets were replaced with fucking cannonballs. Ugh. I'm just joking around. The consequences for failing here are much less brutal. These kids can never play soccer ever again. Oh, also, they willingly signed themselves up for this shit, so they have no one else to blame but themselves when they fail. So while it doesn't have the immediate urgency of a death game kind of series, there is still a lot of stakes involved with this show, and it's pretty fucking insane, too. First off, I'm just kind of astounded that the Japan World Cup Association, or whatever this show's equivalent is, the parallels are there, would be willingly portrayed as this completely desperate organization who just really, really, really wants to win a goddamn World Cup and will put a bunch of high schoolers against each other in order to find the best one of them to have that slim fucking chance. Because yes, they have not won a World Cup, neither has the US though, so get the fuck over yourselves. But more importantly, there's a constant theme of breaking down your own ego and just engaging and absorbing and indulging in your most selfish desires and your worst impulses in order to become the best singular striker that you can ever be. While there are some regular bouts of teamwork and, you know, other tropes that regular sports shows would still have, and this indeed does, there's only one of these kids who's going to be the striker that these guys are looking for, so it does a really damn good job at digging into that really nasty psychology. I mean, it certainly helps that everyone here looks like they're tweaked out of their goddamn minds. Like, I don't want to keep making the Danganronpa comparison, even though the art style is very, very, very much reminiscent of that series, but goddamn, some of these characters could go toe-to-toe with some of the characters in that series. I'm not kidding. And there's enough twists and turns to keep people like me, who have absolutely no interest in this particular sport, engaged with the story and wanting to see just where the hell everything is going to end up. This is the closest I got to watching the World Cup this year, essentially. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm a little behind on it because it's another one of those shows that continued into the winter season after this previous year had passed. But yeah, I'm really liking what I've seen so far. Can't wait to see more. And I'm just really goddamn happy that 8-Bit have another really good sports series on their hands. So give it a B. It's not better than Stars Align, even if that one didn't get a proper second half, which I'm still fucking bitter about. And here we have the final show that Cloverworks did their production wizardry with this year, and it's the one true surprise hit from them too. Bocchi The Rock is another musical comedy of sorts, but instead of a time-traveling warlord who gets into pop music management, this is about a pink-haired guitar warlord who also happens to be an extraordinarily self-conscious, anxiety-riddled teenage girl. The show chronicles the poor lifestyle of our poor Bocchi friend here, who thinks that all you need to get ahead in life is just learning to play the guitar, and then people will just come rushing over to her to just talk to her, and she'll be the most popular girl in school and all over the world. But a big shock, that's not quite how it works. And that pretty much remains until she has a chance meeting with another teenage girl who plays drums and needs to find a guitarist for her band, lest it fall apart. Against what she believes are her best interests and, well, herself, she reluctantly joins and meets up with two other quirky characters, a bassist and another girl who ends up being the main vocalist and eventually guitarist after Bocchi teaches her how to do that, and thus the immortal Kasoku Band has been formed. The music side of things goes the way that you would expect it to. The struggles that these musicians would have to go through, the bad live performances when they first start out, and the money that they have to raise in order to get those live performances booked. But what really elevates the series is that comedy. Like I said, Bocchi is just a complete emotional wreck, and the show takes every opportunity it can to showcase that, mainly through us viewing her inner thoughts and the whack-ass fictional scenarios she comes up with in her head. Well, I can't imagine anyone else who's been through that. That's just completely ridiculous. And you know, I'll be honest, I wasn't really that into it at first. I won't deny the show does look very, very good. It's not quite as good looking as Cloverworks' earlier work in the year, but still pretty nice, and what music there had been was also very nice, but I just don't think the kind of comedy this show is shooting for was really working for me. Like with Komi-san, it's not really mean with showing these anxiety trips, but it just felt like it had to have something a little bit more in order for me to get really hooked on it. And it's not like I was going to drop it or anything, but I was just waiting for that to happen, and thankfully it did. As the show goes on, and Bocchi finds herself in these increasingly weirder situations, and her little episodes as a reaction to these situations get even crazier and crazier, the show just completely breaks down into a bunch of these really neat mixed media segments, and God, her expressions are all fucking over the place, and it is glorious. And that's just when she's by herself. When she's with the whole band, like, the reactions to her little fits are even funnier. But more importantly, they lift her up in all sorts of great little ways. Just the chemistry between these four is fan-fucking-tastic, as are those musical concert performances. They look great. And it just stayed that way for the rest of the series, so yeah, despite that slow start, I am very much on board with Bocchi The Rock, and I'm very happy it's gotten as popular as it has. Getting an A rank, without a doubt. Also, check out that Kasoku Band album that they put out in promotion for this series. It's got a lot of neat J-pop rock on it. It'll definitely fill the hole that the Peggies left behind. Okay, let's get to the actual Mappa show everyone and their goddamn grandmothers freaking out about. I'm not bitter. In fact, I do like me some Chainsaw Man, the wonderful, heartwarming tale of a teenage kid who gets way in too deep with the Mafia and ends up getting sliced up to bits by them until he forms a pact with a demon and becomes this awesome chainsaw-wielding devil-human hybrid, and then so on and so forth. I read the first part of the manga in a single sitting and loved it as much as everyone else had, and was a little perturbed, but very happy that it ended up being as popular as it is now, because God, it is a fucking weird series. Although like a cool and collected kind of weird. Not quite the insane batshit that you would see in other not as popular series. Although this series is definitely batshit insane. But when an anime production had been announced, and it was going to be done by Mappa, and we started seeing those first teasers, I was ecstatic because it just looked Christ. Like, I know these previews like putting in the best looking moments from the series in here to entice viewers, but God, even if I weren't already a fan of the series, like, that preview would have made me want to watch the show. And that also made me a little bit worried that this was as good as the show was going to look, and practically everything else about it was just not going to be up to snuff, and like the fact that it took more than a year to finally get here, alongside Mappa being Mappa, definitely didn't help. But despite those reservations, the hype behind this series was absolutely fucking insane. Like, Crunchyroll went all in on the promotion for this. Like to a point that in my viewing experience for the past 5 years, I had never seen before. Like, it's fucking insane. And when it was finally out, yeah, it was pretty great. Once again, it's just so great to see a series that has so much push behind it actually live up to that hype. Like, obviously the production here, is fucking glorious. Everything looks great, especially that direction. Every single scene is just deliberately paced and constructed in such a way that it is as effective as it could possibly be. And every single moment here is given its own little time to shine, and nothing is wasted. And you know, for as grandiose as this series looks, I understand the people who do not think it looks as great as they had wanted it to, or how it should look from its original source material. You're gonna get stuff like that when a series is this fucking popular, and this has as many devoted fans too. But personally, besides like some shots having a bit of flat lighting here and there, and maybe some of the character designs not quite being as deranged as the main series is, I can't really complain here. I think, again, everything looks great. On a technical level, this series succeeds with flying marks. But the other thing I was worried about going into it is how it was going to pace itself. It's only 12 episodes. You're not going to fit the first part of this manga into 12 episodes. Thankfully, like I said, that's not an issue whatsoever. But in fact, you could also argue that it's a little bit too deliberately paced at time. But I think that the moments the show takes to kind of slow down, it uses it to expand on those character traits that were ever so slightly hinted at in the manga. Like, you can definitely tell, like, there are some sequences in here that kind of feel like they might be going on a bit longer than they should be, but they're just so great, and just a nice little respite from all the fucking insanity that goes on with it. Works perfectly. Oh, and the story is also great as well. It's not quite gotten to my favorite moments in the first part yet, but what they do adapt here, they do it super well. I can't really even think of any major flaws besides, well, maybe the CG and the fight scenes don't look great, and the impact the show had on me is a bit dampened from having read the original series, but my god, they fucking knocked this out of the park. I still can't believe it. And unsurprisingly, it was a massive hit. How massive of a hit? Its opening theme crossed over into the American rock music charts. Oh, and cracked the Canadian charts as well at the very bottom, number 100. But still, that has never happened before with any opening themes, as far as I know. We've never gotten any hits on the Hot 100 either from any anime opening themes too. It's always just been the Japanese charts. Like, the closest thing that could be an equivalent to this, or just this happening at any point in the past, is when the Kingdom Hearts 3 theme from Hikaru Utada cracked the Hot 100 a couple years ago. But that was mostly thanks to Skrillex. And this doesn't just go to show how popular Chainsaw Man was with the States, it goes to show just how big of a cultural force anime has become. Like, at some point in the future, there's probably going to be an even larger series with an even larger cultural impact that's gonna have this kind of thing happen. And I cannot wait for that. Because when that happens, you know you've hit it big. A rank. And let's follow that up with another one of the more popular shows from this year, Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Y'all remember Cyberpunk 2077, right? It had one of the most notoriously awful launches in video game history that overshadowed everything about it, and how it was apparently a pretty decent game. I wouldn't really know, though. I haven't played it still. Well, this tie-in was announced a few months before the game's release, and put out almost 2 years after that game's release. Just enough time to make mostly everyone who really cared or was just kind of knowledgeable about it to forget that all this stuff had ever happened, so that it wouldn't overshadow this as well. And it worked because the number of players in the game skyrocketed following this show's release, and, well, the show itself is pretty good. They were smart enough to get the good folks at Trigger to produce this and get their head honcho to direct it for his first work after Premiere, and the stuff he did for Star Wars Visions. Although they were also smart enough to get someone else, especially I should say themselves, to write the story, so that it didn't end up being another one of my cybernetic implants will be the cybernetic implants to reach the virtual heavens, or some equivalent. Look, I like Premiere and I like a lot of this guy's stuff, but that kind of shtick is starting to run its course, so This was a nice breath of fresh air. Taking place within this cyberpunk universe, we follow a poor Latino boy named David, who is the top student at the city's most prestigious academy, but one thing or another happens to him, and as a result, he gets in league with the Edgerunners, who do all sorts of dirty work for the city's underbelly. The story from there plays out in a kind of predictable manner, but I like it anyway because it brings in yet another fantastic cast, and it never ever lets go of its rapid pace, even during the weirder moments. And Trigger just lets loose with its production once again, but in a way that fits this universe. A universe that just happens to have fucking Keanu Reeves in it, so it's a match made in heaven. And yes, that includes Rebecca. So yeah, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, good stuff. Still think about that last episode to this day. God fucking damn that last episode. And as far as Trigger shows go, it's probably on par with Kill la Kill for me with how I feel about it. Not quite up there with Dynazeman as their best, but still pretty great stuff. Put this in the A rank too. Also, I watched the dub for this, and having Giancarlo Esposito, I thought would not really work out well, but goddamn, he did it again. What can I say? That dude just does a really good job as a villain. Yeah, another Girls Doing Girls another Girls Doing Things series has ended up as one of my favorites of the year. What are you gonna do? In fact, this is probably the ultimate Girls Doing Things series, as it's called Do It Yourself. And I don't think I can describe this show in any other way than by calling it fucking adorable. This one comes from a newer studio called Pine Jam, who have had their hands in some pretty interesting stuff that cover a wide variety of genres, and this is their first original work since Just Because, a rom-com from a couple years ago that was written by the Bunny Girl Senpai author and had character designs by the Tawawa on Monday author. Yeah, you can imagine how that show played out. Do It Yourself is comparatively simpler, as it's just about these girls doing all sorts of DIY projects, and while it is very, very simple, I like the setup quite a bit. The world this very relaxing slice-of-life series takes place in feels like if all those Amazon drones started just increasing in quantity more and more, and to the point where all that hard work us humans have been doing is just increasingly becoming more and more unnecessary, as robots will be able to do all that shit themselves and we don't have to worry about any of it. Okay, maybe it's not the most original setting, but for what this show is trying to do, it works perfectly, especially with the way it separates its main two characters, and you're gonna have to give me a second here. Urusei and Suridi Miku. Oh, sorry. Suridi Purin. You get it? You get it? The show is even more I'm gonna read out. Kure Jobuko Shi Takumi. I don't think her name's a pun, although I could be wrong, but yeah, that's the vibe this series is going for. Anyway, Serafu and Purin were next-door neighbors growing up, and were set to go to the same high-tech high school together until Serafu fails the entrance exam and ends up going to the perfectly normal high school next door. But thanks to that, Serafu ends up discovering and joining the DIY club, which has its members make all sorts of weird shit with wood and screws and seashells, and from there the show plays out in the way you'd expect. Now, there are a lot of comparisons I can make between this and other shows of its ilk, but the one I wanted to, I haven't seen a whole lot of. Of course, I'm talking about Laid Back Camp. So I'm going to make a different comparison here with another show that I watched called Asteroid in Love, which was another Girls Doing Things series that centered around astronomy and also had a pairing with some sapphic undertones. But the problem with that was that it looks so bland. And with it, I learned that if you're going to have a show with as simple a premise as that, you want this kind of show to succeed in pulling in an audience, and it doesn't have any super dramatic moments to go along with it, then you gotta make it look as distinct as possible. And that is where Do It Yourself succeeds. And it looks so good. The washed out color palette, the expressive character animation, the attention to detail with all of the DIY stuff with building and implementing every single aspect of it. Pine Jam did their research, and it shows. And again, while the story itself doesn't really have any surprises, it sells its characters and world so well that I couldn't help but just find everything about this show so fucking adorable. And for as much as the show loves its old-fashioned methods, it doesn't outright dismiss future technology as well. In fact, it incorporates that with those methods and mixes them together in a natural, smooth manner, and that is the show's biggest accomplishment. Everything technology-wise is going to change and progress no matter what, but these methods can still coexist at the same time, and that's the most important takeaway. But honestly, my favorite part was probably the trumpet work and the music for the bumpers. Fucking love the trumpet. Anyway, fantastic series. Great stuff. Opening and ending was also really good. S-rank, 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 S-rank. I'm gonna be honest with you. This is the show that broke me. Like, fucking 95 rom-coms in a row, watched, liked every single one of them in one way or another. And this was the show that just completely broke me. Well, when your premise involves a high school marriage class that has two members of the opposite sex live together in a dormitory and make them do all sorts of marriagey stuff in order for them to get marriage points so that they can fucking graduate, because this is a required class, and there's just cameras put all over the goddamn place recording this shit, and this just sounds like a fucking Black Mirror episode. Okay. Maybe I'm overreacting. Is this really all that different from what A Couple of Cuckoos was doing earlier in the year? Well, kind of, but the show at the very least doesn't have this kind of oppressive feel that the premise would imply it does. But even then, I just could not get involved with these characters. They were just the most annoying fucking dipshits possible, and that pacing, man, like that for the very first episode of Tomodachi Game, it just gave me anxiety. I can't do this. I only got 5 episodes in before I just quit outright. It was not worth it. Okay, good. This one I can actually get behind. Although it took me a bit to. Yes, amongst all of these other shows, we have the 3rd and final season of Mob Psycho 100, one of the most beloved series of the 2010s, which has the wondrous tale of a young middle school boy who has these psychic powers and very much wishes that he did not, but just kind of has to deal with them and all of the weird shit that's happening around him. Like, really, the show just kind of felt like an excuse for Bones to flex their creative muscles, and on that front, it looks pretty sick. But man, for the longest time, I just was not seeing the hype behind it. Like, I liked the weird vibe that it had, and some of the characters too, but beyond those visuals and the production, I just was not seeing why it was so beloved by everyone. But that was just my initial impression. Having now rewatched both seasons to prep for this one, and with the dub this time, the very good dub, I should say, I still don't quite love it, but it finally clicked with me. And for this last one, I just wanted it to mix things up from beyond the very similar structures its first 2 seasons have. Because that first half had all of this weird supernatural stuff going on, and these mysteries to go along with it, and then the second half was these shonen battle scenes with psychic powers. And the show did them both well, but if it could just meld them together in some way, I think that would make it the best for me. And lo and behold, that's exactly what they did. I personally think that first half is some of the best work that the series has ever done. It just feels like a perfect culmination of all of its themes and arcs up to that point, and not since that 5th episode of the 2nd season, in fact, I think this one surpasses it, have I felt the series just be so suffocating and uncomfortable, and in the best possible way. It is great. Oh, and that fight scene that happens at the very end of that was pretty sick, not gonna lie. I don't think that second half quite matches up to it. It's a a little bit inconsistent and takes a little bit too long to really get going. But fuck, once it does, shit, dude, what a perfect ending. So overall, while again this series is not going to end up as being one of my personal favorites of all time, I finally see why everyone loves it, and I can comfortably put this last season in the A rank. I'm going to miss you, Mob, and all your weird little quirks. And I'm going to miss you too, broom hair guy. My Hero Academia is the series that got me back into watching anime. During late summer 2017, I was on the computering device, not really doing work when I should have been at work, and I saw a clip on Twitter of the one little short of Froppy and the mongoose girl, and thought to myself, man, this sure looks pretty interesting. And then I saw that class roster, and every single one of those character designs looked really neat. And so, I just gave this show a shot. Why not? And ever since then, I've been hooked. Like, it's the first ever manga that I've bought. I saw all the movies in theaters. I've been to conventions where I saw panels for the voice actors, and I thought about cosplaying as someone from there. Not sure who, but I thought about it. So, if you can get me to that point, I like it very much. And now we are up to season 6, the 6th season of this long-running series. And it's still pretty good. Granted, I've only seen like 6 episodes of it, but I already know what's happening afterwards, and I'm usually at this point watching some other series too. But still love the series, still really into it. I hope to God they don't make another movie, but I'm probably still gonna be there for it or whatever. So yeah, I can't really give it a ranking here, but still very much like it, and this is just the part where I give it my thanks for getting me back into this little kind of medium. I'm definitely not embarrassed about that fucking bit from the Kingdom Come Deliverance video, or the fucking rape in video games video either. What the hell was I thinking? This had some cute ideas. My Master Has No Tail is about a little female tanuki who ventures out to the human world in order to trick them, as tanukis are wont to do, but continuously fails to do so because the old-fashioned methods of tricking are just not working on these gosh darn humans. So she thinks she has failed and is going to be resigned to just this failure of a life until she meets a female Rakugo, who also happens to be a magical box creature, and decides to learn the ways of Rakugo to trick those humans the modern way. Again, it's a cute idea, and I like the historical fantasy world that this takes place in. I think the general story is fine. I like how it's presented. Line Films, here again, they do a decent job. I'm just not really big on Rakugo. And because the show revolves around Rakugo and the Rakugo stories of old, that's a kind of a problem. For the uninformed, Rakugo is like an ancient method of stand-up comedy. It features one person telling these long-form comedic stories, and they only have a couple props here and there to work with, and mostly do this while just sitting down on their knees. It doesn't sound very complicated, but like with stand-up comedy, it requires precise timing, the capability to have different voices to distinguish characters, and, especially in the case with Rakugo, good rhythm and flow for how these stories play out. It's a very unique form of comedy that I know a lot of people can definitely get a kick out of, but I always just felt so distant with the stories and just how dry and slight they felt. And even though the show was nice enough to include these post-credit sequences that explain what that episode's story was about and its origins and the punchline, I just could not get into it. All that said, that's just a me thing. The show is not terrible at any way whatsoever, and what strengths it does have were more than enough to make it a pleasant diversion from all the other shit happening this season, but it's not getting more than a C from me. I know there are other Rakugo shows I can definitely get into, just not this one. Now this fantasy show is more to my liking. Based off yet another light novel series, Raven of the Inner Palace is a heavily narrative-focused series that takes place in the old days of historical China. It still has the monarchical societies and the weird magic stuff, but is more character-centric than centering on the world that it takes place in. The titular Raven is also known as the Raven Consort, and consorts are generally the emperor's or leader's concubines, who they serve him to have potential heirs to their throne, if you get what I mean. But the difference with her is that she does not perform such duties. In fact, she is confined to very particular duties, and a lot of that involves detective work. There be a bunch of ghosts in these lands, suffering all sorts of horrific fates, and so the series consists of the Raven Consort and the newly installed Emperor, as well as a bunch of other fun characters, investigating these mysterious deaths and learning more and more about themselves and what their true fate may be. There's a lot of things happening in this series, and there are a lot of really heavy themes too, and sometimes it feels like it's a little too fast-paced for its own good, but the writing here is so goddamn strong, that never bothered me. With this show and some other series, especially the previous year's Maruko-chan, I think I've come to love just when a series explores themes of death that are innately depressing and sad in a more optimistic and uplifting manner. And even though this show does have a set formula, it has more than enough twists and turns to keep things interesting all throughout. And I love the relationship between the Raven and the Emperor, and just how their lives are tied to these bullshit decisions made in their past generations that they had absolutely no control of, and that definitely involves a healthy dose of generational trauma. True, it's not the best looking show, and sometimes it feels like it's not giving you enough time to absorb all of the information that's just thrown at you, but it still has some of the best narrative work I've seen all year, and that is more than enough. A rank. Spooky A rank. This is one of those legacy shows that I've always been interested in getting into, but just has so many fucking episodes out. Maybe I could get that Discotheque Blu-ray, but for now, we just have the remake. And again, I only lasted 5 episodes. It's not bad, but it's one of those comedy shows where everyone in here is a fucking idiot, and everyone is constantly yelling. And I can only handle that a few moments at a time. And watching 3 episodes of it back to back when I did fall behind on it, it's a sensory overload. The last thing I really need when watching some of these shows is constant yelling. Why didn't I just watch the new Gundam series? Anyway, Uzaki-chan is another one of those teasing series that I had mentioned when talking about Takagi-san a little while back, but instead of a cute middle schooler who's just kind of playfully teasing her fellow middle school crush, we have a college-aged short stack who is just absolutely annoying the fuck out of her crush. And when the first season of this series aired a few years back, a lot of people did not take very well to her character. And can you blame them? But personally, it's not just because her design is not great. That just happens a lot in here anyway. No, it's because she's fucking annoying. But out of everything that first season had, the most annoying thing that I found was that fucking cat and its dopey-ass expression. I fucking hate that goddamn cat. I want to murder it, crush it between my hands, stomp on it till it's a small gray stain. But I just stuck with it anyway, just because I had to finish out the whole teasing shit just to see which is the best one, or at least that's what I told myself. And, it didn't end up too bad. There was some decent chemistry between our main pairing here, and some genuinely sweet moments. There was enough going on here that it had me actually kind of looking forward to what they were going to follow it up with during this second season. And the answer to that is nothing. essentially nothing. I already knew there were going to be issues here when that first episode had a flash forward to what appeared to be the moment, and there's a very good chance that that moment was going to be at the tail end of the series, and so that was communicating to me that everything leading up to that was probably not going to be worth going through. Once again, I was right. Having determined that these two are basically made for each other, the show spends the entire fucking season going, oh my god, man, they're really, really made for each other, while every single character around them goes,
oh, for heaven's sakes, just kiss, you moron!
And that would be fine. Shows like these tend to stagnate the romance in favor of some more comedic stuff, and if there were that in here and it were funny, that would be perfectly acceptable. It doesn't have that. One of the primary gags is just a lot of yelling to each other, which, you know, it was kind of cute at first, but at some point it just got really, really fucking irritating. Another running gag features the main male character, Shinichi, by the way. I almost forgot his fucking name. He's such a great goddamn memorable character. Going to a gym that Uzaki's father just so happens to own, or is the president of, or something. So they work out together, and he's just essentially unaware that the two are hanging out together and kinda, sorta, a thing, an object, or whatever, until it becomes a little too late. Oh, and there's also something about Shinichi having a massive schlong, because of course he fucking does. And once again, the show essentially has an episode-long advertisement for some hot springs resort that, granted, does look pretty neat if it is representative of the actual place, but it's even more blatant here than when they did it with Okinawa in the first season, and I just wonder, why did I keep watching this? The one interesting bit was how Shinichi's parents had another kid while he was away at college, and they just didn't tell him. Not because they're estranged or anything, or there's any tension, it just forgot. That was kind of humorous, but when that is probably the best joke your show has the entire season, you know things have become bad. Also, they own a judo dojo, and I really don't want judo dojos to become a signifier of a show just completely shitting itself, but at this point, can you really blame me? Oh, and obviously they don't pay off that flash forward from the first episode in any significant way. I cannot stress just how fucking frustrating watching this thing was. You know, the other series that is currently airing at this moment, Nagitoro-san, I like that way more. Like, I found more enjoyment in that series than pretty much everything that Uzaki-chan has done. If it weren't for some halfway decent episodes here and there, just filtered out from the proverbial clogged drain that was these 12 episodes, it'd be getting an F. But as is, it's still getting at the very, very bottom of the D tier. What a great show to end this video on. So there you have it. All of the anime that I watched in 2022 to completion, or enough that I could kind of talk about, all in this singular video. Here is the final ranking as it stands. I am never going to do something like this ever again. And despite how, as you can tell from the runtime, how very tiring this video became in not just shooting, but in editing, I still had a lot of fun with it. Like, I just like talking about all of the stuff that I've either played or seen or whatever. Like, that's why I made this series to begin with, as a companion to Controversy and all the other gaming-related videos I do on this channel. Like, even if it doesn't get as many views or feedback as other videos do, it's still something I like doing, so I'm gonna keep doing it. And for the next episode, we will definitely be going back to just talking about the games I've played. So until then, thank you for watching, or listening if you're not even watching this video. If you aren't, you couldn't even tell that I completely fucked up here and got the wrong sweatshirt for the last session. So thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. Now, how am I gonna finish this bit within the next controversy?